Violence on the streets and almost insurmountable Brexit bureaucracy. In Northern Ireland, the problematic consequences of Brexit are becoming clearer than anywhere else. But Brexit is not the only reason why the old conflicts have broken out. 2 rows of armored police cars stand on Springfield Road in Belfast, for example. A young man in a black mask runs up and throws a stone, and he hits. He runs back to his friends. Residents stand by, watch the whole thing, and some comment. Thick black smoke rises over the city, and in the Union District of Schenkel, young people just set a bus on fire. And that's why angry teenagers are gathering there in the Catholic Quarter. The Catholic part of the city is separated from the Protestant part by a high wall, the so-called Peace Wall. On the gate through which you can pass the wall, it's written, "There was never a good war or a bad peace." And never were there truer words. The quote from Benjamin Franklin is intended to recall the time of the Blood and Northern Ireland conflict, the so-called Troubles, which ended in 1998 with the Good Friday Agreement. And that evening when all this happened that I described, the gate is closed. The Catholic youths run there anyway. They are trying to break open the gate, throwing stones and bottles, and they get angry. Across the street is Caelan, I think the name was McCaffrey, with other residents. Black t-shirt, glasses, a thick cardigan. The tensions come from the pro-British royalists. They were strongly fueled by the politicians. And this is now the revenge of the Irish nationalists because they feel their group is being threatened. But in principle, both sides are destroying their own communities and the places in which they live. McCaffrey is 25, grew up in his working-class Catholic neighborhood, studied at Queen's University, and now works for a large international company in Belfast. The Northern Irish woman is not familiar with excesses like this. She says, nothing has happened in the last 10 years. On the contrary, both sides worked together when it came to women's rights or same-sex marriage. Honestly, it's absolutely heartbreaking. We grew up in the shadow of this wall of peace. We didn't know what this conflict looked like or felt like. And we don't want to experience that anymore. Our parents suffered enough from that. The aim of the Good Friday Agreement was to soften the bitter fronts between Catholics and Protestants. And I know many complain about me using those words, but that was what it is. So far, this has only worked to a limited extent. The 2 groups still often live in different parts of the city and send their children to separate schools. And yet in the younger generation, for people like Caelan McCaffrey, things began to change. But with Brexit, the question of identity became topical again. Newtown Abbey is a Protestant suburb of Belfast. Terraced houses, manicured gardens, the British flag, the Union Jack, flies in the middle of a roundabout. The low wooden fence next door burned down. Here too, young people threw Molotov cocktails at the police. And they don't want to give their names, but they want to talk, and some media talk to them. They were all born after the Good Friday Agreement, and today they say they no longer believe in it. The Good Friday Agreement was made to keep us peaceful, Catholics and Protestants, they say. But now it's over, we can no longer hold on to it. The Catholics want a united Ireland, but that won't happen. They don't know what it really means not to have that peace. And since Brexit, there has been a tendency towards secession in many parts of the UK. A new independence referendum is being discussed in Scotland. And in Northern Ireland, the Irish Republican Party Sinn Féin is campaigning for reunification with Ireland. Even if this is unlikely to happen anytime soon, it scares the pro-British Protestants. And they say, they treat us like second-class citizens. We are upset about it. So we protest and riot against them. We are all teenagers. We grew up in this country and we don't want to be part of a united Ireland where they'll treat us like dirt. The young people are convinced that they are already being treated worse than the Catholics. They portray the Catholics as flawless, they are privileged, they are the upper class, they say, and we are at the bottom, we are treated like farmers. Bobby Story's funeral in Belfast in June 2020 is considered a trigger for the current riots. More than 1,000 people had come to the former IRA members' memorial service. The IRA, the Irish Republican Army, was a paramilitary organization that fought for a united Ireland. The Deputy First Minister Michelle O'Neill from the Sinn Féin party was also there. Sinn Féin was considered the political wing of the IRA during the Northern Ireland conflict. Actually, no more than 30 mourners are allowed because of the COVID pandemic. But none of those present will be punished. This was officially confirmed recently. Protestants are very angry about this. The Protestant youth finds this unfair, and they say if those were Protestants, everyone would be arrested and charged with breaking the COVID rules. Welcome to Larne is written at the entrance to the small port of the Northern Irish town. A ferry from Scotland is being unloaded there. The trucks drive over the ramp and are now in Northern Ireland and thus in the EU trading area. This is what Brexit, more precisely the so-called Northern Ireland Protocol, wants. Here, EU standards apply to all products. Therefore, the goods are checked on a nearby site. Boris Johnson has broken his promise that there will be no border in the Irish Sea. Around about next to the port is where a poster hangs on a stake, EU hands off Ulster. 2 graffiti on a fence next to it was painted over. Previously it was written there, all border post staff are targets. John Chen runs a garden centre on the outskirts of Larne near an expressway. And Chen is 66-year-old and is visibly happy that customers are coming back to shop after the lockdown. He's been in business for over 40 years. And he says, we live in a beautiful country and I'm against it when people everywhere spray such slogans on the walls. That is not acceptable. We are a hospitable country. When the lockdown is over, we look forward to the tourists. But the things that happened here the other day will put them off. Shannon wasn't surprised, however. Larne is a unionist town and Protestant resentment over the Northern Ireland Protocol is palpable everywhere there. Shannon himself also had to look for new suppliers after Brexit. He says, in December last year, an English supplier from whom I buy flower bulbs and seed potatoes said to me, we will soon have major problems delivering our products to Northern Ireland. We strongly recommend that you order early in December. I did, and it was a very good decision. New rules that are not new, but new to the UK, that have been in place in Northern Ireland since January are responsible for the bottlenecks. You are not allowed to import seed potatoes from the rest of the UK, and you're not allowed to use potted plants. The UK government temporarily suspended these rules, but it didn't help Shannon, because health certificates and customs declarations must still be submitted for each delivery. He says the stack of documents for a shipment can be 2 or 3 inches thick. That's crazy. I have an excellent supplier of azalea, rhododendrons and camellias from England. I ordered a delivery before Christmas. The second delivery should have come in March or April. They went out of their way to send me the goods, but in the end they called me and said, we can't handle this paperwork. It's too much. The shipping company will not accept your delivery. Before Brexit, Shannon bought 50 to 60% of the plants and seeds in the UK. Now it all comes from either Northern Ireland or Ireland. The 66-year-old doesn't think the Irish Sea border will disappear, but thinks the formalities need to be simplified. In 2016 he voted against Brexit and he doesn't want a border with Ireland. But after the recent riots he fears that further violence may occur. And he says, the EU must understand that if it does not relax these very strict rules for the movement of goods between Great Britain and Northern Ireland, then the violence can escalate again. Unfortunately, our history of the last 30 to 40 years has shown that if you take to the streets and cause chaos, you can change something. We are in a situation where violence is worthwhile, and that is absolutely wrong. Back in Belfast, Jim Wilson, another guy, drives through a working class neighborhood in the east of the city. In the 19th and 20th centuries, workers from the shipyard where the Titanic was built lived there. You can tell immediately that mainly pro-British Unionists lived there. Union Jacks or flags from Glasgow Rangers, a football club that is mainly supported by Protestants, hang everywhere. And here graffiti still revere all loyalist militias like UDA, the Ulster Defence Association. One picture shows a man in camouflage uniform and a black balaclava aiming at a rifle at viewers. This is a mural from UDA. Today the UDA and UVF are the largest groups, explains Wilsons. And he says they were all created to protect our Ulster from the IRA. Jim Wilson was once a member of such a militia himself. He was a member of Red Hand Commando, a paramilitary group responsible for several murders of Catholic civilians. The 68-year-old was in prison. Today he works for the Reach UK project, which aims to integrate former paramilitaries into peaceful life. Wilson voted for Brexit in 2016, but now he regrets his decision. If I had known what was going to happen, I would have preferred to vote to stay in the EU. That would have been easier. There would have been no violence on the streets, no problems for our children. But at the time, I had the feeling that we are losing our British identity to the EU. Wilson says he is against violence, but the political demands he makes sounds drastic, because he says, we want the Northern Ireland Protocol to go away. We don't want a difference between us and Manchester, Glasgow, Cardiff, the cities of England, Scotland and Wales. We want exactly the same conditions. This is something we fought for when we resorted to violence and responded to Irish Republican violence. Because it was said we will remain part of the UK until we decide otherwise. Wilson is a member of the Loyalist Communities Council, which also includes representatives from paramilitary groups. The organization said this year that it no longer supports the Good Friday Agreement. Wilson says the largest paramilitary groups have nothing to do with the recent escalation of violence. And I'm sorry, I don't believe a word of that. But Northern Ireland is currently debating the extent to which people like him will add fuel to the fire if they reject the Good Friday Agreement, or if they make young people feel that they are at a disadvantage as Protestants. Politicians from the pro-British DUP party are also criticized for this. A service in the Catholic Church of St. Paul's Church, where the priest Anthony Devlin stands in front of the congregation in a white robe, is another place where we have to go. The Catholic thinks that no politician in Northern Ireland should send divisive messages to the youth. He says sometimes you can't tell whether individual politicians actually want to stop the violence. I know they all want the violence to stop, but they also want the protests to continue. But you cannot feed young people with such messages and then expect them to do nothing. I'm not so sure if all the politicians want to stop the violence. I'm quite frank about that. And that's me saying, not him. Anthony Devlin was on Springfield Road during the riots trying to calm down the Catholic youth. He says, I was on this side of the wall. They listened to me, they were kind, but few stopped throwing stones. That's the truth, only a few stopped doing it. Together with Protestant pastors, he met for a common service. He hopes the violence doesn't escalate any further. And he says, we hope, and that's all we can do. Pray and work, go to the other side of the wall, talk to people there, and hope that we can all find a less dangerous form for the protests. But it will not work, and his effort and those of his colleagues, which are admirable, will not work as long as politicians, especially politicians, stir up the situation and throw fuel into the fire. And that's exactly what the DUP is doing at the moment. And telling the people, over and over that they are second-class citizens, then they will feel like them. Brexit was just a small part that ignited that now, but it was all there. And we must not forget the majority of the young people are very European, and I'm not only meaning that in the EU way. They are away from all this thinking that was there in the older group until the Good Friday Agreement and still kept with that generation. But the most of the younger people in Ireland, Northern Ireland, have gone another step away from that. And I said it in another video, there are deeper roots for all these things, and that those people that can be influenced most by this, behind this, with these young people, there are many more social problems that had to be addressed. They are probably, many of them are not very satisfied with the conditions of their lives. We have the same here. The kids that are doing the trouble, there is a lot of social stuff behind that. And that has to be addressed. But there's one thing that must not happen, and I really blame the DUP for that. You must not incite these people that should deal with their own situation, and they should get help for their situation and a perspective for their situation, and not ignite these people. And so I'm quite sure there's a lot of stuff going on there which is impossible. Also, what Wilson said about the EU not doing their rules. They will have their rules and they will stay. There's no way around that. They are for protecting a market of 450 million people. And everybody knew that before the decision for Brexit. The problem is that the British politicians did not talk about Northern Ireland. I made another video on that the situation in Northern Ireland, and especially the consequences for Northern Ireland, have never really been mentioned, neither in the brochures, neither in some nice speeches they held there to get what they want. That was kept, as we say, under the carpet. That is the big problem. What is happening now is just the only solution for the consequences of Brexit. That the riots are not all caused by Brexit, that it was just some ignition. I said that often enough, but we have to deal with the consequences of Brexit under the circumstances of reality and not wishful thinking. I'm sorry to say that, but we cannot do anything else to prevent a hard border in Ireland, which would be the very worst case. And there we're back at the DUP, telling people you're second-class citizens, you don't have the same rights as we have. People in Northern Ireland have even more rights. They can go into the EU in form of Ireland without any checks. Because the good thing is the CTA is still in force because Ireland is not part of Schengen. And so there's no problem there with the most important part of the Good Friday Agreement. The free movement of all Irish. Northern Irish. Doesn't matter. So, but we want that to stay. And the only thing that's happening in the north is goods coming from the UK are being checked. That's all. No people, no services, nothing else. Just goods. So, the people have the same rights as the people in Wales, Scotland, England. There is no difference, except that they have a little bit more towards Ireland. They even have more, not less. But when a party always tells you and heats you up by telling you you are separated from the rest of the country, you get your rights taken away, people that don't get into the details of everything start believing that. And that's why it's such a dangerous situation. You've been lied to if you live in Northern Ireland before the referendum. And you are still being lied to. And it was not only Boris Johnson's promise, no border in the Irish Sea. You're being lied to by the DUP about what is being taken away from you. And that is the dangerous thing at the moment. And all I can do is really hope that the people will find a way to calm down and try to bring facts out here instead of headlines with one-liners that tell you nonsense. So that's why I'm coming back to Northern Ireland over and over again, although I know it's a very difficult, a very sensitive topic, but I'm trying at least to add something to the whole picture, the big picture, and to say something against some of these lies. Will not have a big influence, I know that, but that's all I can do, and I want to do at least that. And if you want to stay informed, please subscribe to my channel. Auf Wiedersehen.